around. I'm actually really pleased to see how many people are still here. Usually there's a bit of entropy that goes throughout the day, and I guess since you're already intrepid enough to be here today, then maybe sticking around was kind of where you wanted to go. So thanks again for sticking around. So just as a reintroduction, my name is Scott Smith. I work for WIT, your host today. We're an analytics and digital transformation firm. And this year we wanted to try to do something new and have a panel with some folks that we know around town, customers and otherwise, that can kind of answer some questions that I think would be helpful for the general audience. So I'd like to introduce our panel here. Next to my immediate left is Khuzema Tikiwala. Khuzema is a solution architect for analytics at Meritor, right around the corner. So just another Troy-based company, but big industrial manufacturing type company. Khuzema and I go back quite a ways, and so I know him well. So I promised him I'm not going to stump him with any questions that might be too difficult. I'm just kidding. But next to Khuzema is Saima Sattar. She is the Director of IT for Digital and Analytics at American Axle. And Mark Fisher here at the far left is one of my colleagues at WIT, actually new with our organization. He's our Director of Digital Transformation, but he has a rich career in analytics at both EY and General Motors. And so because we did have some defectors for the panel, we had to have a surprise ad. So that's why Mark's on the team with me here. Okay, so what we're going to do, like I mentioned this morning, is we're going to ask the audience a question first, and then we're going to kind of talk about the answers. It'll be interesting to see if we're surprised by any of the answers. So I'm excited to do that. And then after we ask that question, we're going to... Okay, it's coming. All right, so we're working on it. Thank you. So we're going to ask a question, we're going to talk about it, and they'll have a couple follow-up questions for the panel. So the idea is that we hope our panel is kind of a conversation, not just a Q&A. So I'll kick us off. Well, it's not up yet, so I guess I need to wait. So we'll hum quietly the Jeopardy theme. Okay, so we can see the question, but is the app itself up yet? No? Okay. All right, I'm getting the thumbs up. Okay, so where does the primary analytics function exist in your organization? So if you could quickly type that in. We've seen it all. We've seen it, analytics exist within IT. We've seen it exist within the business. We've seen it completely, the Wild West. And so it is interesting to see. Okay, so not a big surprise, right? Centralized within IT? Uh-oh. Huh. Yeah, the business people, they're waking up. Well, that's very interesting. I would not have thought it would be a kind of a three-way tie. And, Saima, how does analytics work in your organization? Where is it sitting?
Centralized within IT.
Okay.
It's under our CIOs.
Okay.
Even though we have, in the business functions, we are also trying to build those roles as power users who are part of with the dotted lines working with the analytics team. But mainly it's under IT department.
What about you, Khuzema? How does Meritor do it? Now, Mark, in your career, what have you seen?
I'd like to give two examples. So first off, when I was at General Motors, GM really started off with little analytics teams spread throughout the entire company. And about 4 to 5 years ago, they decided to actually hire a chief data analytics officer. they pulled in then, and that was not within the IT organization. And that was actually in the business, reporting right up almost directly into the CEO with like abstracted one layer. And they pulled a lot of the data scientists into that group, but they still kept a lot of the analytics teams out in the business. So even though there are a few in IT, for the most part, it's primarily business driven. The other example I'd like to give, which I think is really interesting, is when I was with EY, my main client was Disney. So I traveled down to Disney Parks and Resorts pretty much every week for 4 years. And they had a group about a decade ago that was just called revenue management. And their goal was just to try to generate as much revenue as possible. And they had one project that was extremely successful. And you guys may be aware of the movie The Lion King. They turned it into a Broadway musical. And what they did was they discovered that people were going to see The Lion King on weekends, and they'd have a full house. It's like $300 a ticket. But on a Tuesday night, it'd be half full. So what they did was the revenue management team used analytics to create a variable pricing model for The Lion King. And it was one of the most successful projects ever. Lion King is the highest grossing Broadway show ever. They've done about 8,000 productions. To compare that to Phantom of the Opera, they've done 12,000. So even though Phantom of the Opera has had so many more productions, they've actually generated a lot more revenue. So that became so incredibly successful that the revenue management team just got a bigger budget and started taking on more and more work, and more places in the company came to them to generate stuff, and it just turned into the analytics group at Disney. So, and that was just, I thought that was a real interesting story, and that's kind of how Disney Analytics is born.
So not just because we're wearing blue shirts, somehow you kind of had a nice segue into my next question, which actually I think is probably the hardest question on my list here, but how do we measure success as analytics professionals? You know, it's very difficult, I think, sometimes to help our customers understand the value of analytics, and actually, you know, how do we justify the cost for new tools? How do we justify the cost for new resources? And how do we keep score? How do we know we've done a good job in analytics? So I'm going to start off with you, Khuzema. How does Meritor justify IT in analytics? Okay. So Saima, how about American Axle?
Absolutely. I think it's both qualitative and quantitative investment. It could be just that you're simplifying something for a group of people. For example, when we were talking earlier, I gave an example of what we did for our warranty and quality department, where there was a lot of work going on in the Excel files and manually. But then through the analytics, we were able to automate that. So it's very hard to put like a price tag next to it and say, okay, if I implement such and such solutions, this is going to give me these results, and I'm going to save $500,000 or $2 million. Sometimes it's just qualitative improvement. So it's come into surface. For example, in the whole manufacturing side, what the work we are doing, and as they are seeing results, they are finding further things which they can improve from the operational quality side, or from the product engineering, or from manufacturing engineering side. So I think what analytics provides them that window, opens up for them, where they can see the data and they can find more and more patterns, and it's like a trickling effect is amazing. So I think if we try to start a project after finding, okay, if I implement such and such solutions, I'm going to start saving that much money from next year onward, that will never happen. We may see as a failure towards the end. But if we take small steps and have the investments according to what's the immediate business needs, but at the same time keep investing more and more as time goes by, that's the best way of doing it. For example, recently we have moved to our cloud solutions from our on-premise database, and it came with its own challenges, but at the same time we were able to reduce our overall administration, people who we needed before in our on-premise versus how many we need with our cloud solutions, with Snowflake and other things in the Microsoft side. It's amazing, it's transformational. And then from the business side, if you look what we are giving them through those algorithms, through those analytics, is opening up more and more projects for us. So we don't have to invest again and again. Investment is done. Now it's time to see the results.
Okay, great. So Mark, in your analytics career, how have you seen companies keep score?
You know, what I think is important is, as you, as an analytics organization, gather opportunities and track, what you prioritize to actually work on, as you start working and delivering, you do need to measure it. And part of measuring it is sort of the long-term follow-up with the business. Because as you're measuring it, and as you want to maybe create some sort of monthly, quarterly, yearly metrics on what impact you're having on the business, just by the nature of measuring it, as an analytics organization, you tend to follow up with the business. Are you getting value out of this? What is it? How are we measuring it? The KPIs, what can we be doing to continue to iterate and push that forward? So obviously there's core things like profitability, improved revenue, reduction in costs. There's even things like cash flow. But then there's nuanced things too, like you might have a transformative initiative that you have to accomplish, and it has to be done, and sometimes you need analytics to get those accomplished, or sometimes there might be some new law come through from the finance or accounting perspective that has to get accomplished. And by just achieving those things too, that also can be thought of as value. So really measuring it and following up with the business and really pushing them to make sure that they're leveraging the tools, and you continue to evolve them to continue to drive more value.
I think one thing, as Saima said, that it is very difficult to estimate an ROI when you are trying to do this thing. I mean, how you estimate that, okay, how much you are going to save and justify the cost of it. But then I think for us, like it's kind of, you start small. And the beautiful thing about analytics is that, okay, one division or one department gets it, they like it, they bring out the ROI, others will want it. So that is how it always happens, that, okay, it's kind of mouth canvassing and it goes on, and it spreads like that in the organization. That's what we have seen so far.
Okay, makes total sense. Mm-hmm. Good, great segment. All right, let's move to the next one. Okay, self-service. So self-service has been interesting throughout my career in that I've got some friends in the industry who used to say very strongly that self-service is actually mythology. Nobody's really doing self-service. But I think with the changes in tools, over the last 5 or so years, we're seeing a lot more. So it's real interesting. So does your company actively promote self-service analytics? And it looks like we have a clear winner here. So
it's changing.
Oh, spoke too soon. That's the power of real-time analytics, right?
Is this self-service?
Apparently it is, yeah.
I like that.
So, Khuzema, I'm asking you first because I kind of have some insight as to how you set it up, but how does self-service play in your portfolio?
So as I said, we started centralized within IT, the whole analytics thing, and now we are pushing really for self-service. The idea is that, the idea is that, okay, business people, they know their business more than IT people. So they know what the data means, and they know how they can use it and things like that. The only thing they don't have is capabilities to bring out these analytics and everything. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to be enablers and then provide them those functionality, and then those tools they can use and do that particular thing. So that's the whole thing about the self-service side. And I think another thing is actually in a typical manufacturing industry, and I think probably Saima will agree with that one because we are kind of in a similar business. The confidence level in the data, it's always like in question. So I think if IT delivers something to the business, there is always some level of like no confidence in the data kind of things. But if it is done by the business people themselves, then their confidence level is always high. It's my thing, we have built it, I own it. So that's the sense of ownership is a big thing when it comes to analytics. And then it also drives the usage. And we also saw one thing that it is driving data literacy, and which was very interesting, that we delivered analytics, and then people within one functional group I was talking to, they said, okay, our people are more literate about our data now after this dashboard, because earlier they did not even know that, okay, how we are doing these kind of things, what my data is, what is the meaning of this particular data. So it is also driving that data literacy, which is really very difficult in a centralized environment. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's difficult in a centralized environment. So that's where our push for self-service is, that we enable our business customers, our business people with all the armors they need to maybe do these self-service analytics and make better decisions now out of it.
Okay, great. So Saima, where do you sit?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree most of what you just mentioned, but I would also add that self-service from the platform perspective as well as from the analytics side. So, for example, in the past when we had all on-premise commodity-based infrastructure, now we are more in the cloud. Every time you want to implement something, you have to order a new server, more memory, and then wait 8 weeks. It arrives, then somebody has to come in and put it together, then we start something. So now with this whole cloud approach, things are so fast. We are using AWS, several components of AWS along with Snowflake and other things. So it's very quick from a technology perspective. It's self-service. I don't need 4 or 5 DBAs who are doing sizing for us and doing this, doing that. So that's one way of looking at it from IT side. On the other side, from the end user, absolutely, the analytics is for users. They are the owners. Our job is to provide them the data in the fact tables and in the right manner, the way they want to see, give them subject areas, and then let them explore, let them be self-sufficient rather than opening tickets and opening project requests for IT, where they need a new column in a report, or they need to see data from this angle, that angle. And then that comes all along with the training and also their mindset. If I say in American Excel, different departments are different, and with the new generation, things are changing drastically. Especially in the manufacturing, if you go to plants, sometimes you'll see some engineers and people in plants, they don't want to talk about analytics at all. I still remember going to one of our plants where we had the SPC charts running, but the person, he was picking up every component and looking and then checking, and I said, why don't you use the results for it showing whether it's a reject or accept? I said, no, nothing goes through without these eyes, so I must, and he was very experienced. But obviously, as new generation is coming in, they don't like it. They don't want to do things manually. They want to be self-sufficient. Quickly, they can do things by themselves. So as the generation is changing, being self-service is a key to success. And more they understand their own data, as you mentioned, they feel ownership, they feel pride in it, that they are the ones who have put it together. Obviously, our IT help or the data engineers' help is always needed, data scientists. But I think going forward, data scientists are not just going to be part of the analytics team. They'll be data scientists in all business functions because they understand the business more than us. And that's where the value is. But we have to work as partners together. It cannot be in silos.
Makes sense. So Mark, I know you've seen a ton of self-service in your career.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I would say right now, self-service is a really hot topic. And I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago, a lot of companies thought they were doing self-service, and they assumed that, hey, we're going to make a cool dashboard and we're going to stick it out on some website that lots of people can get to. So, okay, we published it, now go make $1 billion for the company, right? And what would happen is, 99% of the people in the company just kept doing their job and either weren't aware of it or had no idea what to do with it. So fast forward to, maybe 2019, and when I was at GM, I actually started a group there that was called Analytics Enablement. And so it supported all of finance and shared services, and we actively went out and did awareness training across the entire finance and shared services organization. We trained people specifically on tools that they could create visualizations themselves. We actively did training on what data is available, how do you go get it, and then how can you do self-publishing, and we provide coaching, we networked with them and helped create prototypes or even collaborate on small projects. And that was really, it was really eye-opening because we got a lot of wins, and you kind of need that layer between IT saying, there's your tools, and the business who's just trying to get through their monthly life, right? They're trying to take care of business and do what they do. So you really need a core team of evangelists or analytics enablers to really go out and push that stuff out, and we saw a huge uptake there. So I think that when you say promote self-service analytics, I really think that's the way to do it, and that's what's being done more often now. So hopefully we see more of that as the advent of these tools become more and more easy to use for business users.
I think one more thing about this whole self-service. I mean, if you look at from in general perspective, so if you just sit down for 2 minutes and write down everything you do from morning till you go to the bed in the evening, and think about how many of those are self-service or how many of those are the ones where you are dependent on somebody. Unless you are a billionaire and have 100 people around you doing everything for you, maybe most of the things we do ourselves. So that's a way of life. I mean, self-service in some ways, and I think it has to go into our professional life too in that sense. And that's how we need to maybe push for these kind of things. So that's kind of just look at from that angle also.
Okay. Yeah. So with self-service, with my own eyes, I've seen some big self-service failures. Now those were a few years ago, and so we've seen a lot of organizations put guardrails. But I think, Mark, you were kind of heading down that path a little bit. From a self-service kind of governance perspective, what are some of the guardrails that you've seen most effective?
Yeah, a lot of them are access to data and how people interpret data. So in the automotive industry, for example, when you want to say, what's monthly sales? There's really 3 different ways you can calculate. Actually, there's probably 100 ways you can calculate it, but there's kind of 3 core ways, right? Automotive companies sell cars to dealers, and that's one way of doing it. If you're in accounting, you need to do revenue recognition, which takes into account what actually got delivered at a very specific day to a customer and what got returned, all that sort of thing. And then to the finance analyst, it's all about, hey, a month later, dealers are going to get back sales incentives, and there's a whole bunch of complex transactions you have to do to create what the actual sales number is. So if you were to just kind of unleash generic things out on the entire company and say, here's sales, one number gets published, a big boss sees that, and they swoop in and shut down the whole thing and say, nobody touched the data, right? So some of the things that you have to do are A, make sure you're managing the access to the data, but also you don't want to restrict everything. Creating personas around around the data to really give certain departments their own viewpoint of it, but wrapping and labeling it in those particular perspectives is also really helpful. So I think you just have to, as you continue to push things out and enable the entire company, you do have to actively monitor it, and you have to kind of let it out and kind of keep an eye on it and get feedback as you continually grow. I don't know what else to say about that.
Okay. So Saima, what's your perspective on how you kind of put guardrails around self-service?
Yes, definitely. Governance is extremely important to have data security, make sure object level security and data level security is there. So depends how critical data is. One good thing about the analytics is it's not data input. We are not entering data, we are not creating transactions, we're not cutting POs or changing pricing. So the whole segregation of duty concept, which is normally used and followed, and with those SOX auditing and everything are around that. So that's not part of analytics. Analytics is only the output. So the only, I shouldn't say to take it light, but it's a different type of governance model. First thing is that if there is your company's LRPP, the financials, forecast of 5 years, which that data is only should be available to certain people, then there has to be roles defined. So we have to do all of that. And the whole model needs to be put together upfront. Because as we go build more workspaces, for example, in Power BI, and as we go along and build further subject areas in our Oracle products, there has to be like some set rules behind it, that who will have access to that. And then not only that, if users are creating their own reports, they can do that, but in order to make that report formally available to be shared with everybody, they have to go through a process. And that's how we have set it up. End users, we have tons of power users in almost all functions. They will build reports, but when they want to deploy that, or they want to make it available through workspaces, or make it, convert it into an app, then we have those very limited associates who have the pro licenses type of things, who can only deploy those. So there's like getting the sign off. Don't make it so open that people are launching all kind of reports. What if the algorithm is not right, or they selected wrong data set and the results are not correct? So it can have a negative impact too. So it's a very nice, I think it's a medium fine line between being self-sufficient and self-service, as well as have those rules around it to not to make it too open or too wild.
Okay, great. What's your perspective, Khuzema?
So for us, Meritor, we are a publicly traded company, so data security is always like a big thing, and we are when it comes to security, we are very conservative in that sense, and we are very much into like data security and all kind of securities. So what we are doing, that we are controlling the data governance and data release side of it. So anybody who can see what data in the analytics tool, we control it. And then anytime there is new data coming into the analytical platform, we go through a process. We have a data compliance group, so that has to go through them, and they need to approve. They ask you a series of questions, like whether it's an ITAR data, export control, and if it's export control, it will go to internal audit. They will review it. They will then give the blessings. And then whether it's GDPR, PII, all kind of these things, SOX compliance, all these kind of things, they will look into it, and then they will give the approval. And even after that, once we get that compliance approval, it has to go through an architecture approval. So we do an architecture review. So we have an architecture review board, and I sit on that board. And then we go into that review board, and then we review the whole thing from all the perspective of the company. Like every functional group would be there. They will look at this data. And if anybody has any issue with the data, they will raise the hand and say, okay, I have some issue with this data going out to this particular department or these people or something like that. So once it goes through all the approval, then we release the data in analytics that, okay, yes, it is ready for your consumption and you can look at it. So it goes through a lot of these things before we release it. Now, even after releasing the data, once the dashboards are built, then we control the migration of the dashboard. Then we also have, again, another process which has to go through. So then we need an approval from the business for that particular functional area, and it has to be somebody in the management level in the business, and they will approve that, yes, I looked at this dashboard, all the KPIs in there, everything we have in there, it makes sense, I've reviewed it, it all looks good, there is nothing is skewed or no wrong calculations or anything like that. Once we get that approval, then only we migrate it and open it to audience for consumption. And then third level is that, okay, who can see what? That is also controlled by the business. So they decide, okay, this person can see this data, and within this data, only this much, this kind of thing. So that's, again, like another level of security we are putting in. So that's data security is a big thing for us, yeah.
Okay. All right, so the last polling question to the audience. So what's your organization's plans for data and analytics in the cloud? Being in Metro Detroit, I think our participation in the cloud is probably a little bit behind maybe some of the East and West Coast companies, but it'd be interesting to see. So are you cloud first? Some type of combination, never cloud? I know of some companies that have stated that recently. It'd be interesting to see how these results look. So definitely some holdouts in the never cloud space. It's not a surprise, and it's not a surprise at all that the hybrid model makes a lot of sense.
That's all with the winner.
Okay, so I think we can confidently say this is probably where this is heading. So, Sam, I know you've had tremendous success with cloud, and I'd like to start with you.
Definitely. So right now we have a hybrid model, but our long-term roadmap is fully public cloud. It's, I wouldn't say it's public, but still private. American Axle's private in AWS right now. So we have our private cloud on-premise with EMC, our own Converge, as well as we are using AWS for our some from the infrastructure side, and then also, as I mentioned, we are using analytics, Snowflake, which is also in AWS platform. So long term, our goal is to go fully cloud, full public cloud, but it's a journey. We are still depreciating with some our investments with Oracle, with our databases and our own commodity-based infrastructure. So we have to wait for that, and it's a huge transition to be fully public cloud. But the opportunities and the benefits are enormous. What we have seen so far with whatever we have moved to the public cloud has been amazing. So as we are taking this journey, it's giving us more and more confidence. Right now in the analytics, we have traditional analytics with Oracle, which is on-premise. And we have the advanced analytics for the manufacturing and for plant floor systems, more statistical work, machine learning, which is in the public cloud. So it's a hybrid approach, but we do have in the next 3 to 5 years, our roadmap shows that we will be transitioning fully to public cloud, and it's going to completely transform the size of our departments within IT, the infrastructure, the architecture, and what role everybody will be playing is going to be completely transformed as well.
Okay, great. So Khuzema, what are your thoughts on cloud at Meritor?
So I think if you ask me in that way that, okay, whether we are in cloud or not, then in some ways we are fully in cloud, because last year we migrated our whole data center into cloud. So everything is now in cloud. But then the approach right now is, or the direction is, that any new thing coming up in Meritor, it always have to be evaluated for cloud first. If it can be in the cloud, that's the direction. If it cannot be, then again that whole architecture review board thing comes into picture. They will review it, and then it will go through the whole process and decide, hey, it cannot be in cloud, maybe then it sits in like maybe some on-prem kind of thing. So there are some data we still need to have on-prem, like export control data and all those things that will never go into cloud. So that's kind of a direction right now. So we are a hybrid kind of thing, but at the same time, cloud first is the strategy. And on the data and analytics side, our whole platform sits in cloud. Now it's not a SaaS model, but everything is in cloud. All of our data warehouses, everything is in cloud. So in that sense, yes, we are already in cloud, but we are not really like a SaaS model yet, like software as a service model. We are going in that direction, so anything new happening, we'll look at that first as a SaaS model and see if we can do it. If not, then it would be, hey, can we buy some out-of-shelf software and put it in cloud, maybe in infrastructure as a platform kind of thing, or infrastructure as a service kind of thing. So that is where we are right now. We are not into like platform as a service as far as data and analytics is concerned yet, but yes, we are evaluating that options, and if there are any benefits out of it, we will be open to that too.
Okay. So Mark, can you make a case for never cloud type companies?
Well, I would say there's a couple of, so some of the companies that I've been talking about. So GM, I wouldn't say is never cloud, but it's cloud last. So they really want to control their data. They have massive infrastructure to maintain it. I guess there's a concern that if they do go push a lot to cloud, they lose control on the dynamics of what might happen as time progresses. So the only time I think a company like GM uses cloud is when there's just some feature that they can't have without cloud. Disney, on the other hand, it's an interesting case. Disney has its own custom-built reservation systems, custom-built ticketing systems, and they have a massive amount of data that they also captured. If you ever go to Disney, you get those little wristbands and they click. Every single time that you tap something with that, there's about 600 rows of data that get stored in a database somewhere. So they have so much custom stuff they've developed that cloud doesn't really make sense for them. Now, my brother works at a small company down in Ohio. As they've matured, they don't have a single server in their entire building. They are 100% cloud. So, you know, if you're small, nimble, you don't have to deal with it, or if you're a startup company, it's a no-brainer. You're just going cloud because it just makes total sense on scalability and how you manage everything. But if you have an enormous infrastructure and tons of data centers, in some ways you kind of justify what you've got, and the momentum keeps going for these really large companies, and that's where I see a lack of going, large scale up to the cloud.
Okay, great. So last question for the panel. And it's kind of an open-ended one of sorts. So, as a lifelong consultant, it's been, my job, it's our job to stay current with, not only current with technology, but current with ideas and that sort of thing. When we do some level of vetting of the sponsors that, attend our events. So if there is alignment with what we think our attendees are interested in, we'll absolutely love to have them. But I guess, Saima, how do you stay current on the latest and greatest? There's a lot of things changing in this space.
Absolutely. I think it's very critical for us to keep learning about new technology, stay informed, and stay, these type of forums that are very helpful to share ideas, to see where others are going, our competitors, our customers, suppliers, and the whole world. So I think it's to get that competitive advantage and to keep moving the business, because we have to help the business to keep moving, to make a difference. Otherwise, they will just continue the way they work and they won't know better. It's our job to learn and educate. So I think to stay on top of, and there is so much information out there that you have to just keep learning, just stay, never settle on something, because by tomorrow what you have is going to be old and there's a brand new technology. But at the same time, don't get too obsessed with brand new technology that I must implement this, I must implement that, because you have to find the business value in it also. Because technology, just for the sake of technology, we may end up wasting a lot of money if we are just obsessed with new technology, unless there is a business case. So it's, I think, being in part of IT as an analytics leader, I think our job is to make sure that we stay informed, keep learning, and also keep learning the business as well. Where that new technology is going to fit in the business model, the digital twin, does it make sense for automotive? Does it make sense for our industry at this time? Or is it something to get to know, but no need to take any action at this time? So I think it's a continuous learning and continuous journey, and very exciting journey.
Okay, great. So Khuzema, how do you stay on top of change?
I think for Meritor, innovation is always a big thing. Innovation is one of our pillars. So we have sets of pillars for our as our objectives or goals, if you will. And then innovation is one of them. And then within IT, we have a separate department, which is innovation department. So that's their whole job, that, okay, keep innovating with new things coming up or what's happening in the industry out there. And then not only in IT, even in other areas, like maybe the whole electrification going on in terms of and then now Meritor has this whole Blue Horizon effort going on. That's a completely new, the whole innovation thing, that what's new coming up in this particular market in automotive industry, and they are experimenting with that and evaluating, okay, what can be good for Meritor. So what we are trying to do is actually we are trying to keep ourselves ahead of the technology in a way, because for a typical manufacturing industry, we were behind a lot in that sense. We are catching it up, and then we now want to keep ourselves ahead of the technology in that way. And then even within the IT department, that we are always there are always opportunity to innovate. That innovation group is there. If you have new ideas, new things, or maybe you learn about some new technology which you think that may be useful for the company, you can always bring up those ideas and those things. So that's always there. And now keeping up to date with the technology, we have our HR department is excellent in that particular sense that they have a different, within HR, the completely different group who just, their job is just to keep people engaged with the technology and everything. Every quarter we have about hundreds of trainings out there for employees. Okay, you can just go and take any training if you want and just learn something new. They always bring people from outside and just keep people up to date, keep their employees up to date about the new technology trends happening in the market. So we are in that sense, it's very open. I mean, we are not we are always looking for what's new coming out there, but at the same time, okay, how we can use it or how it can benefit us. It's not just for as Saima said, I mean, it's not just for the sake of just maybe something new. I want to experiment with it and I need maybe $1 million for that. That's not going to work. So I think we are always trying to look at in the perspective that, hey, with this whole Blue Horizon effort going on, how does it fit in there? And then we have this whole Industry 4.0 going on right now. We are trying to go into the industrial IoT segment. And then it's a big effort going on, and we are looking at all the latest technologies available to help us with that whole drive. We are trying to achieve smart factories, connected people, connected vehicles, all these kind of things we are talking about. It is happening. It's not just the talk. I mean, it's happening on the shop floor. People are trying to find ways. We are actually trying to find ways with analytics. And some of the use cases I talked about in the morning, that how we are trying to put the display boards in the shop floor and then maybe give the data or whatever information they need in an automated way to the people. And then maybe something like I talked about end of assembly line, that whole mechanism to automate that whole process of product validation and things like that. So we are doing a lot in that sense. Okay, we always try to keep ourselves up to date with the technology where it is going, but at the same time, yes, I mean, the perspective is always what is good for Meritor. That is always first, and then anything else is after that. So.
Great. So Mark, what's worked for you to stay ahead of technology?
It's definitely a lot more challenging now than maybe 5 years ago. Because being, leading the digital transformation organization as opposed to just a core analytics group, you now have things like robotic process automation, you've got process mining, you've got, different nuances of viz tools versus data workflow tools versus, advanced tools versus AI, natural language processing. How do you plug into Internet of Things? Everyone's got these new solutions. At the same time, you've got big companies like Microsoft trying to make better versions of all this stuff as well. So I think there's a social engagement component to it. So you really want to build up a network of folks both within your company, but also just, LinkedIn and Google News and all the various stuff. You want to just make sure that you're on the sort of list where you get triggered and are at least staying in the loop with what's happening out in the industry and at least kind of stay abreast. And you do your best to pick and choose what looks like is going to be sort of the stuff that sticks and is here to stay. But it's tough. It's tough. There's just more and more noise and more stuff out there. So hopefully, summits like this help to cut through some of that. But it's definitely challenging, and it's something that you should devote time to and at least be on the lookout for. What you did 2-3 years ago might still be working, but there could be better options on the horizon. Great.
Well, I'd like to thank the panel so much. This was a great experiment for us, but I want to give a round of applause for everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone, for staying.
I guess, Saima, I'll take that from you, if you don't mind. Thank you. Okay. So you want to shut this one off? This one here? Just like every other year at our event, at the end, we always have that time left over for our sponsors to give prizes to the folks who've stopped off at their booths. So I'd like to call up the sponsors who have gifts that they want to hand out. Now would be a good time. So we sort of left it up to each sponsor to come up with their own methodology around how they come up with the person who wins. Most of them have fish bowls and draw the card out and that sort of thing. But I'll let you announce who you are and who won.
Hi, my name is Pat Ryan. I'm with Incorda, joined by John Howie with Incorda. We are the no ETL, no modeling and then analytic play. So for those that stopped by, appreciate the interest. For those that we didn't have a chance to talk to, would welcome the opportunity in the future, so thank you. Our methodology is just a blind draw, so I'm gonna have John pick it. Scott Harris. Scott is not here.
So we also allow the methodology of winner must be here, or you can pick another one.
Well, I'm sorry, Scott, lost out. Pick another one. I want somebody to get him, take him home, use
All
him
right.
tonight. Amber Slezik. Wow. I may be taking him home.
Well, you're never gonna let me pick again, right?
Brian Merksey. There we go. All right. Can't say this wasn't legit. This is. Congratulations. Sure. There you go.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
Good.
All right, so Tim Shields with SnapLogic, and we're giving out a Sonos speaker. We do real-time data integration. We can connect any source, any target in real time, eliminating coding. So I've got the lead list here. I will scroll through and do a no-look select. And that's going to be Craig Hodges, Information Builders. He left, didn't he? Okay. Next, we have, all right, let's do this. Karen Conley. All right, congrats.
Hello, I'm Greg with Vertica, and we are giving away a wireless Bose headset. My first pick is Hazib Yazdani. Oh.
Hi, I'm Amanda Brooks from Microfocus, and I already did the Rolly thing earlier, and it's Shashil Bhatt. Nice.
All right.
Oh, you go ahead.
So hello, Terry Savage from Databricks. I don't know if Howard is in the room, our solution architect. He wanted to say hello to everybody. But thank you for coming by our booth. So from all those who came by the booth and got scanned, we're going to run this this pick. It's a $150 gift card with Amazon. So I thought you might like that. All right, let's do it. First is Sue Postemski, Chief Data Analytics Officer, Michigan First Credit Union. Thank you. Oh, one second.
Still touching it after you.
Yeah, she's touching the box and I held it in my hand, so I hope you should be good.
Let's spray it off with the spray. There you go.
Thank you, Scott.
Yep. Should be
Can
on.
you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. My name is Jennifer Quappas. I'm with Snowflake, and we're the best performing analytic data platform in the cloud. This is going to be kind of sad because my peers left with our list. So we have AirPods that we're going to give away, and we'll do a drawing, and we're going to mail it out. But a lucky booth attendee will receive these shortly. So thank you for having us, and thanks for stopping by the booth.
All right, that works. Great, thank you.
I am the proxy for a few other sponsors who had to leave early. So we have an Amazon gift card, $100 Amazon gift card from Talend. And is there a Rafael from FCA? All right, sorry I didn't pronounce your last name, but here you go. Plastic coated. Yep, that's for Rafael. And this next one is from Splunk. It is a, looks like a Bose speaker, so nice and handy. And is there a Stephanie Kaczynski from United Shore? Awesome. All right. There we go. Congrats. Final things to give away. We are giving away whoever was the top leader on the leaderboard. So everything that you did today, attending sessions, filling out surveys, connecting with people in the app, racked you up points, visiting booths. So got to check who the leaders are. Looks like leader number 1 with 12,114 points is James White. All righty. So this gets a $100 Amazon gift card. Congrats and thanks for your involvement. And number 2 is Liz Savar. Server, sorry, she told me at the registration and I forgot. $50 for being the second most engaged person. Thank you.
So don't go anywhere. Okay, cool. All right, so we are basically done. I think one last announcement. We're going to do it again next year, which is going to be March 11th, 2021. We're also going to be holding our second annual Digital Transformation Summit in late September. You're on our mailing list now, so we'll be reaching out to you, and it's obviously a slightly different spin on all this, where analytics is just a piece of that. Okay, want to make sure that everybody, to give kind of back to the team here, if you could just log onto the app real quick and provide some feedback for the survey. Anything good, bad, or ugly, just feel free to type it in there. We won't be sad or mad if you've got constructive feedback. And then once you're done, you're done. And so thanks again for everybody coming out, particularly with all the craziness today, with all the coronavirus stuff. Really appreciate having you, and stay safe. Thank you.